All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into something pretty wild: resort politics in India.
Yeah, it's quite a thing.
So like imagine, right, like election time or whenever things get politically tense.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the parties in India, they round up their elected officials, like their MLAs,
Right.
and they send them off to like luxury resorts.
Yeah, like 5-star treatment, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
we've got a bunch of news articles and analyses here to dig into, try and figure out what this is all about and what it means, for democracy in India.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not just about, a nice vacation or anything.
Right.
It's a power move,
Yeah.
High stakes.
Yeah.
They're essentially trying to like shield their MLAs from being influenced or poached, by other parties.
It's like political chess,
Yeah.
but the pieces are actual people.
Yeah.
And the board is like a fancy resort.
Exactly. And we've got some pretty dramatic examples in the stuff we're looking at.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Like the Maharashtra elections last week,
Oh, right. Yeah.
Both of the big alliances, they were booking up resorts. They even had helicopters, like, on standby.
Helicopters. Seriously.
Yeah, to move their MLAs around,
Wow, that's a whole other level.
It is.
What were they so worried about?
Well, I mean, in a close race, every vote counts, right?
Right.
And parties are always afraid that their MLAs are going to get tempted to switch sides.
Makes sense. Yeah, for like personal gain or under pressure.
Exactly. So by keeping them in, like, a controlled environment, they can minimize that risk.
So that's Maharashtra. The articles also mentioned something in Jharkhand earlier this year.
Oh, yeah. In Jharkhand, the Congress Party, they airlifted 16 of their MLAs to a resort in Hyderabad.
Wow.
They were worried about losing them before a big vote, in the state assembly.
So it's not just about elections then.
No.
It's any time there's a crucial decision that could shift the balance of power.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be effective, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the articles actually point to a case back in June 2022. Congress did something similar in Rajasthan. During the Rajya Sabha elections.
The ones where state legislatures vote for members of the upper house of parliament?
Yeah, that's the one. So by keeping their MLAs at a resort in Udaipur, Congress managed to avoid defections that could have cost them seats in the Rajya Sabha.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this resort politics thing, it's not new.
No, not at all. Even back in the 80s, you had Devi Lal in Haryana doing similar things to hold on to power.
But one thing that stood out to me reading these articles is that one party seems to have gotten really good at this.
Oh, yeah.
The BJP under Modi.
Yeah, you're right. They do seem to have a knack for this kind of maneuvering.
So what is it about the BJP that makes them so effective at this? The articles mention deep pockets. Is it straight up bribery?
I mean, it's not always that blatant, but
Yes.
the BJP definitely has the resources, to offer incentives to MLAs who might be thinking about switching teams.
Right, like lucrative business deals or promises of positions in the government.
Exactly.
So it's more about persuasion than maybe even subtle coercion rather than like suitcases of cash?
Often, yeah. And it's not just about the money either.
What else then?
The BJP under Modi, they have a very top-down structure. There's a strong emphasis on loyalty and discipline. Makes it tough for MLAs to go against the party line.
Especially if they see others getting rewarded for towing the line.
Exactly. And then some articles even suggest they use investigative agencies to pressure opposition members.
Oh, wow.
You have cases where MLAs are facing corruption charges, and then
Right.
suddenly those charges disappear when they join the BJP.
So they've got like this whole arsenal of tools, financial incentives, party discipline, and even the threat of legal action.
It's a pretty powerful combination.
It really makes you wonder about the fairness of it all.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And that's something we're going to dig into more in this deep dive.
Yeah, is this just hardball politics or does it cross a line?
No.
So we've seen what resort politics looks like and how the BJP seems to have mastered it.
Right.
But what does it all mean for Indian democracy? That's what I'm really interested in, and I'm sure our listeners are too. So let's unpack that in part 2 of our deep dive into resort politics.
Welcome back. Before we jump back into resort politics in India,
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that, these issues we're talking about, like the fight for power and, systems getting manipulated, these aren't just problems in India.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the whole spectacle of it.
Right.
The resorts, the helicopters, all that.
Yeah,
But really, this is about, the really foundations of democracy being tested.
exactly. And the consequences go way beyond just, who wins an election or a vote.
Right.
We need to think about the long-term impact on democracy itself.
One thing that really jumped out at me in these articles was this idea that resort politics could actually lead to, like, authoritarianism. How does that work?
Well, think about it. Resort politics thrives in an environment where there's no transparency or accountability.
Okay.
It's about making deals behind closed doors, often completely ignoring what the voters want.
So the more this becomes normal, the more it undermines the core values of democracy.
Exactly. Openness, representation, all of that goes out the window.
Yeah, and it creates this vicious cycle.
It does.
Resort politics weakens institutions. People lose trust.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder for the opposition to do their job.
Exactly. And that, in turn, makes it easier for those in power to tighten their grip and further erode democracy.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you weaken the system, the more you need these tactics to stay on top.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's a dangerous path,
Right.
Because when people lose faith in the system, when they feel like their voices don't matter, that's when things can get really unstable.
Yeah.
You see a rise in extremism, in populism, in people promising simple solutions but who don't care about democracy.
Okay, so we've established that resort politics is a serious problem.
Yeah.
But can anything be done about it?
Well, the articles do offer a few glimmers of hope, some potential ways to push back against this tide.
Okay.
But it's going to be tough. It's going to take a real effort from everyone involved.
Like who?
Political parties, the judiciary, civil society, even international actors.
So starting with the political parties themselves, can we really expect them to change a system that seems to benefit them, at least in the short term?
It's a hard sell, I'll admit. But I think there's a growing realization, even within some parties, that this kind of politics is ultimately unsustainable.
In what way?
It's hurting their image, it's eroding public trust, and it's creating this climate of instability that makes it harder for anyone to govern effectively.
So there's a self-interest argument here.
Yeah.
Resort politics might seem like a good strategy now, but in the long run, it could backfire.
Exactly. And that's where electoral reform comes in.
Right.
The articles mention a couple of ideas that have been floating around. One is proportional representation, which would give smaller parties a better shot at winning seats and make it harder for any one party to dominate.
So it's about making those defections less impactful.
Yeah. Less tempting for those who just want power.
Another idea was strengthening anti-defection laws.
We have those laws, but they've got loopholes that make them easy to get around.
Like what?
Well, right now, if a bunch of legislators from a party all defect together, it's often not considered a violation.
Oh, wow.
So basically, you can have these orchestrated mass defections, which is exactly what we see in resort politics.
I see. So closing that loophole could make it riskier for MLAs to jump ship, especially if there were tougher penalties.
Exactly. But, of course, any changes to anti-defection laws need to be carefully thought out.
Right.
You got to balance preventing defections with the right of individual legislators to vote their conscience.
That's a good point. You don't want to force people to just follow the party line out of fear.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
But even with the best laws, you still need enforcement.
Right.
And that's where the judiciary comes in.
So a more independent and assertive judiciary could hold politicians accountable for using these tactics.
Exactly. Courts could potentially strike down laws that enable resort politics or rule against specific cases where these tactics undermine the democratic process.
But the judiciary itself is facing its own challenges in India, right? There are concerns about political interference and pressure on judges.
Yeah, and that highlights a bigger problem. Strengthening democracy isn't just about laws and systems.
Yeah.
It's about a culture of accountability, where those in power are checked and balanced, where the rule of law actually means something.
And that's where civil society plays a role, right?
Huge role.
The articles talk about the importance of citizen groups, watchdog organizations, the media.
Yeah.
What can they do to curb resort politics?
They're essential. They can expose these practices, investigate corruption, and educate the public about the dangers. They can pressure political parties to reform, to be more transparent, to respect democratic norms.
It's about changing the narrative, making resort politics not just difficult to do, but politically costly.
Right.
If parties see voters punishing them for these tactics, they might think twice.
Exactly. And this is where the international community can also step in.
How so?
By raising concerns about democratic backsliding in India, by supporting civil society groups that are working to strengthen democracy.
Okay.
External pressure can encourage reform.
So it's a complex problem that needs a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
But the good news is that things can be done.
Yeah.
It's not hopeless.
Absolutely. And it's not just about India either.
Right.
These challenges, the erosion of democracy, the manipulation of systems, these are global issues.
Okay, so as we move into the final part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
let's broaden our perspective a bit. What can we learn from other democracies that have faced similar problems? Are there any success stories out there?
Yeah.
Any lessons that could apply to the Indian context? We've really gotten into like the nuts and bolts of resort politics in India.
We have.
But now I kind of want to shift gears a bit and talk about solutions.
Okay.
How can we tackle this problem and strengthen democracy, not just in India, but like everywhere?
Yeah, you're right. Broadening the perspective is important.
Mm.
India's resort politics might seem unique, but these issues like power grabs and, democratic norms eroding,
Right.
those are happening all over the world. So there's a lot we can learn from other countries who've dealt with this kind of thing.
Exactly. Let's see what's worked elsewhere. We touched on Kenya's model of decentralizing power. Can you talk more about how that works and if it could work in India?
So in Kenya, they've moved a lot of power and resources away from the central government to regional bodies.
Okay.
These regional authorities, they have more say in decision-making and managing their own affairs.
So it's not all concentrated at the top.
Exactly. It makes those high-stakes national positions less tempting to manipulate.
So if an MLA knows that even if their party loses nationally, their region still has power, they're less likely to be swayed by promises at the center.
Exactly. Now, applying that to India is tricky. India has a different history and political structure.
Right.
But the idea is worth exploring. Maybe strengthening local governance, giving more power to panchayats, or even rethinking the balance between states and the central government.
It's about spreading the power around. So no single election has total control.
Right.
Another idea was ranked choice voting, which is becoming popular in parts of the U.S. How does that work, and could it help with resort politics?
So with ranked choice voting, you rank candidates by preference.
Okay.
If nobody gets a majority of first choice votes, the candidate with the least votes is eliminated, and their votes get redistributed based on second choices.
So it's like a runoff, but all in one go?
Yeah, and it tends to encourage more cooperation and less of that cutthroat competition.
Right, because you have to appeal to more than just your base.
Exactly. You can't just demonize your opponent or make backroom deals to win.
Then it discourages the kind of win-at-all-costs mentality that leads to resort politics.
Right.
Of course, electoral reform in a country as big as India would be a huge task.
It would.
But the point is, there are options out there, things that have worked in other places.
Absolutely. And it's not always about huge structural changes. Sometimes it's about making the systems we have stronger, like anti-corruption agencies.
Right.
In a lot of countries, those agencies are weak, easily influenced by politics.
So it's not enough to have laws. You need institutions to enforce them properly.
Exactly. A strong, independent anti-corruption body could investigate bribery and abuse of power and hold people accountable.
Regardless of their party.
Yes, which would make it much riskier to engage in those resort politics tactics.
And we can't forget the judiciary. They're like the guardians of the Constitution.
Absolutely. A strong judiciary can strike down laws that enable these tactics, hold those in power accountable, and make sure things are fair and transparent.
But all of this depends on something else, too, an engaged citizenry.
That's right. You can have great laws and institutions, but if people don't care, if they're apathetic, the system is still weak.
So things like journalism, investigative reporting, and citizen activism are really important.
They're crucial. They expose these practices, educate the public about the consequences, and push people to demand better from their leaders.
It's about changing the culture, making it clear that this behavior won't be tolerated.
Exactly. It's about giving people a voice in the democratic process, not just letting them be passive observers.
It's about making democracy work for everyone.
That's it.
And that's really the takeaway from this deep dive. Resort politics isn't just some weird thing in India. It shows a bigger problem, a threat to the very idea of a free and fair democracy.
Right.
But it's a problem we can solve if we learn from each other, find solutions that work for us, and most importantly, stay vigilant and involved.
Couldn't have said it better. Remember, the future of democracy is not set in stone. We're shaping it right now with the choices we make and the actions we take.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and keep believing in the power of a truly democratic society.
Well said.
It's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into resort politics.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, and most importantly, empowering. Because the fight for a better, more democratic future starts with every single one of us